but it was a game that came out on the Nintendo DS in 2008, and I loved it. It's called Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood.
Oh boy, this is gonna be a fun video. Okay, so, like most of you know, Game Theory released a video on the Sonic official timeline, and overall, I would say it's pretty decent, besides a few things that made me question if it really works, but I'll get to that. First of all, this is not a video dunking on Game Theory. I've seen a lot of people saying that this video is straight up garbage and horrible and it ended my entire bloodline, and I'm here like, guys, come on, I promise you, it's not that deep. So, first things first, I do want to point out things in this video that I believe are a pretty good addition to the Sonic official timeline. They find a place for many spin-offs in the timeline, and one of them is Sonic Advance, which is a game that also really confused me. When the official Sonic timeline was released, I noticed that Sonic Advance was missing, even though Advance 2 and 3 were there. Yeah, the story, if you even want to call it that, is very generic, but for the sake of keeping things consistent, adding it to the timeline is a good thing. And I agree with their arguments on the placement of it. Another thing they did, which I can get behind, is the addition of games like Sega Sonic, for example, which are the debut games of Mighty and Ray. While Sonic Mania can be considered the game where they get reintroduced, again, me personally, I like to keep things as accurate as possible. They mention how Sega's timeline is mostly ordered by game release, and that also makes it pretty linear. And honestly, keeping the timeline as simple and linear as possible is a good thing. I mean, have you seen a Zelda timeline? Now that shit almost gives me a stroke just looking at it. Nah, I'm kidding. But you could argue that the timeline is fine just by order of release date, except for the position of some games like Mania, Superstars, and I do agree with the placement of those games. It's fine. It makes sense, and it doesn't really require much brainpower to do so. Now on to things that can be considered kind of a reach. First of all, we have Black Knight. Game Theory suggested that Sonic and the Black Knight happens after Unleashed, with its argument being that in that game, there is an optional dialogue with Amy which suggests that after the events of Unleash, these characters would go on a date if you pick the option to do so. Now, I can totally understand where they are coming from, and this can make a lot of sense. My only gripe with this is that, again, this is an optional dialogue. Many players can miss this, or not even make the connection with this, so I'm not really sure about this one. What do you guys think? And then comes the raid boss of this video, good old Sonic Chronicles. When they first showed this game, not gonna lie, I laughed a bit, because this one is always a problem when it comes to arguing about its canonical status. You see, Game Theory presents pretty decent arguments for this game. It even finds a spot in the timeline that makes sense. The problem with this game is that it just doesn't really work. Let me explain. In the end of Sonic Chronicles, after Sonic and friends defeat Imperator Ajax, they return to their own world that was conquered by Eggman while our heroes were away. After a really weird credit sequence where Sonic and Tails discuss the dev team, like seriously, what the fuck is this thing? We get a cliffhanger ending with a picture of Eggman like this, which not only implies that Eggman won and conquered the world, that a sequel to this is coming to solve this problem. And a sequel was indeed in the works, but later on was cancelled. So this just doesn't really work, because none of the future games even mention the events of Chronicles happening. But that's not all. There is another reason why Chronicles just doesn't fit in the main timeline, and that's due to one character, Shade the Echidna. Shade, like Knuckles, is an Echidna from the Marauder forces, and in the end of the game, she joins Sonic's team. Yet we never ever hear from this character again in the future games. And not only that, in Frontiers, Knuckles still mentions being the last of his kind, even though Shade came to Sonic's world to help them. So yeah, there are a lot of issues not addressed about this game that really make you question its place in the timeline. And I'm sure it's because of these issues that Sega and Ian Flynn have stated it not being considered canon. Whew, okay, so that's done, hopefully. I'm sure there's nothing more troubling next, right?
Meaning the silver you fight in Generations isn't actually silver, but a memory.
Oh my god, bro. Okay, so First of all, this segment of their video can get really confusing, and it's not even their fault. This whole Sonic 06 different timeline and the characters not remembering shit is a whole mess. Gotta love that shot of Takashi Iizuka, by the way, with the text saying Sonic 06 creator. I swear, this shit has a menacing aura to it. I do think they explain Blaze, her sacrifice, and her being transported into the Soul Dimension in the timeline where the events of 06 never happened pretty well. It makes sense. I also like the fact that they included the rival games here, as I agree 100% that they work as a reintroduction of Silver. These games should have 100% been included in the official Sonic timeline. My problem with this whole part of the video is where they say that the Silver in Generations is a memory, like Perfect Chaos, Metal Sonic, other bosses, etc. To defend this point of view, Game Theory points out that characters that weren't in Sonic's birthday party are memories or just not really there. Thing is, Shadow wasn't in that party, yet he was still kidnapped by the Time Eater. The same can be applied to Silver. He could also have been kidnapped. In fact, he seems pretty confused when you first talk to him in Generations. Mephiles also appeared in Shadow Generations, and this seems to be like the Mephiles from 06, as he mentions Shadow forgetting him again, and him wanting to restore himself back into the timeline. Another point is the fact that in the end, Silver not only appears before the final showdown in Generations, he also appears in the birthday party after Sonic defeats the Time Eater. I don't know, man, bro looks pretty real here. Honestly, regarding that line in Team Sonic Racing where Sonic and Silver talk about their first meeting, this was probably just overlooked, or the writers didn't really look into the canon when making this joke. Honestly, I wouldn't take this very seriously, to be honest. Okay, so what else do we have here? Oh yeah, this part right here. Yeah, not gonna lie guys, this was probably an editing mistake made by the team. I wouldn't look too deep at this as well. It's literally impossible that Forces happened after Frontiers, as there are lines about the events of Forces in Frontiers. The last thing I do want to talk about is when they mentioned Sonic Prime being a branching path of the main timeline. Sega, as well as Ian Flynn, have stated that Sonic Prime is indeed canon to the main game timeline. Personally, I'm not a big fan of this. Sonic Prime really felt like its own thing, its own universe, just like Sonic Boom. But hey, if they said it's canon, I guess. And that's that. Again, I don't think this video is the apocalypse like a lot of people are saying it is. I think it's pretty decent actually. Should they have done more research? Yeah, for sure. Nobody is perfect though. Honestly, I hope I'm the one not missing anything here. If I am, feel free to call me out and explain why. I'll be happy to learn from you Sonic lore enthusiasts. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a like, and if you subscribe, you will receive this beautiful Sonic plushie for free. See you later.